and the compliance list so that you can start to conduct these elections. So I'm pleased tonight that I have with me Brendan Wakefield and Shanita Harrison-Tolliver, which all of you have probably communicated with in some form or fashion over the past couple of weeks, or you had the ability to meet them at the National Convention. So one of the things, again, I want to make sure we're all on the same page with tonight is all questions need to go in the Q&A session. That way we can make sure we can get an answer to your question, as well as we can make sure that we're able to create a FAQ. If you have not received the election manual and you registered for tonight, the manual will be emailed out to everyone that has registered. This document is no secret. It has been emailed to units as well as state conferences. So we're hoping that everyone is sharing this document. As long as you are a member, you are entitled to this document. We actually also got it posted on the website about 4:30 today. So we'll also let you know the location of where you can go to the national website to retrieve this document as well. So one of the first things we also want to make sure is every webinar that we have tonight, on Saturday, and on Wednesday will cover the same information. You do not need to attend all three webinars. You are free to attend all three, but you do not need to attend all three sessions. So I want to make that clear because I know we've received some email communication asking if you needed to attend all sessions. All right, so Trey, I think next slide, which I think I just covered, which is our info. What you're going to see if you've looked at the election manual, what I am asking is that you please do not email one individual of the team. We need all communication about elections to go to the election mailbox. This way, if someone happens to step out, take leave, your email is not lost in an individual's email box. So I'm going to ask that any questions you have about the election process go to the election@naacpnet.org mailbox. You are going to see that email throughout the election manual. So we want to make sure you understand exactly who you should be contacting about any questions about your election process. Next slide, Trey. So tonight, what we're going to go through, we're going to talk about the new election rules. The National Board did convene, and they did make some changes to our election process for branches. Those rules went into effect as of June 1st, 2024. Cover those tonight. We're going to also talk about when your election process should start. We're going to talk about what needs to happen in your August meeting, your September meeting, and your October meeting. We're going to do a short officer breakdown and executive committee. We're going to talk about your November election. I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Wakefield because he's going to talk to us about the voting and the electronic platform that we'll be using this year to conduct your elections. He's going to walk you through how to use the electronic platform. We're going to discuss undeliverable ballots because we know that was definitely a concern in the last election cycle, as well as how you'll receive those election results of this election. Next slide, Trey. So if you can make sure, again, please put your information in the chat. Again, I'm seeing some questions, so please make sure if you have questions, put those questions in the Q&A session for us so we can make sure that we can get an answer to them. Before I go into the election rules, I also needed to do a little bit of housekeeping for our events team. If you attended the National Convention, and by chance, you attended the resolution session, which I hope everyone that attended the convention did, because that is the purpose of our National Convention. If for some reason you walked out that room with that little clicker in your pocket, we need you to return the clicker. So if you have one of the clickers that was used in the resolution session, we need you to mail that back to the national office. We currently have about 18 clickers that are missing. So we just want to put out the message that if for some reason you left with it, because it's very small, that you get that back to the national office. So if you are in possession of one of the clickers, please let us know so that we can get that back to the company that we get the clickers from. So as we talk about elections tonight, I want to make one statement before we get into this. This is not where our battle is. Our battle is not at the NAACP ballot box. Our battle this year is at the American ballot box. So I want to make sure as we go through this process, we remember why we use this process and why we must follow these rules for this process. We got too much work to do to get caught up in this election cycle. Our ballot is the big ballot, and that's where our focus needs to be. So understand the team put a lot of effort into making sure that we got good information to you guys and that we tighten up this process so that it can be timely, you can get it done, and you can focus on the real election. Because we need to make sure that that's where all our focus is going, and we are all in on making sure the right thing is done in November. So I had to say that because I know sometimes this process can bring out the ugly in us. Let's not let that happen. Let's make sure we fight the right fight and not the fight inside. So the National Board met along with the Constitutional Review Committee, and a couple of changes came down to the election process this year. You will notice this slide has all of the new changes. Anything after this slide and anything after page 4 is not new in your election process. All of those rules have been our rules for the election process. So this year, the board voted executive directors and other staff may not sign the petition of a member wishing to run for office. So if your unit has an executive director or you have paid staff, they are not allowed to sign the petition when you're running for office. Executive directors and other paid staff are ineligible for nomination. They cannot be nominated to hold a position in the branch. Adult unit presidents, treasurers, and secretaries may not be related. That is in the manual, and we're going to touch on that. I asked the Constitutional Review Committee, why did this come about? Because I know we received several emails that expressed you have a concern about this rule. We understand some units are very small, but based off of the issues that we've had coming to the national office and the board has had to address, this is one of the top things that's happened. We need your units to grow. We do not need it to be a requirement that you must be a family member to carry a position of an officer. So the current rule as of June 1st, 2024 is unit presidents, treasurers, and secretaries may not be related. Now, that does not mean you cannot run for office. I'm not going to tell you not to run. You can run, but if you both win, one must make the decision to step aside. As we start to carry out the elections, we will continue to address this. But I want to make sure you understand that rule is clear. There is no wavering on any of these new rules, and they are effective as of June 1st, 2024. No one should have started their election process because per our rules, it does not start until August. If you have started your election process, it is null and void because it should not have started till August. No individually may simultaneously run as a branch president and state conference president. That we are still currently looking at. That is not going to affect this election cycle. So if you are currently a state conference president, you can still run to be a branch president. Persons wishing to run for elected office may not sign their own official nominating petition. So if I am running for office, I cannot be one of the 3 signatures on my petition. That is clear. You cannot sign your own petition. Next slide, Trey. So the August meeting, which is what you should be preparing for. The August meeting should be used to determine the date of your election and the time. What will happen is the national office will send out a form to all unit secretaries. It is the responsibility of your secretary to fill that form out and provide us the date and time of your November election. I want to make sure you see the bottom that says this decision must be made by the general membership, not solely by the executive committee. So this is a date and time that should be picked in your August general membership meeting. The time frame for the election must be a minimum of 4 hours. The election date must be in November, which is why you have a process that is spelled out for August, September, and October. If we do not receive your election date and time by the first week of September, you will receive a notice from the governance team stating that you are out of compliance with the election process. It is very critical to make sure you follow this first step. We must get the date and time of all elections so that we can make sure we are prepared to run your election properly. This is listed in the election manual. Every slide we cover tonight comes straight out of the manual, and none of these rules are new. These are all of the rules that were in the old manual and the manual before that. Next slide, Trey. So your secretary of your unit should be preparing the notice to the general membership. I received several emails saying, I have a membership of 1,000 people and you expect me to mail a notice to all of them. This is not a new rule. The rule has always been that your members should be notified of your date and election time. The piece we have added this year is that you can do this by email. But if you do not have an email address, how are you going to notify them? You have to notify them by mail if you do not have an email address. There has to be some record that you have notified your membership about the election. I'm going to say again, because I'm seeing questions in the chat. The chat is moving too fast. We will not answer questions in the chat. So I'm going to ask again, if you have a question, to please place it in the Q&A box so we can make sure we can get to it. The things to remember in this meeting is the notice must be sent at least 10 days prior to the September meeting, which is why we are starting these webinars now. Notice must be sent to all members in good standing, which is why even though your secretary has access to the portal, we will be sending out rosters to the secretaries to make sure they have the same information we have on file. It is going to be critical that your secretary updates that roster so that we can make sure we have good information for everyone to send out the ballot. The time and place and date and purpose of the September and October meetings should be in that notice. You are going to notice in the election manual, we give you a sample notice. Trev, you can go to the next slide. This is what the sample notice should look like. This is a notice of your September, your October, and your November election. It literally, if you take this out of the manual, you are just filling in the spaces of the dates and the times of what you're doing in September, October, and the date and time for your election in November. We give you this sample notice so you do not have to recreate anything. You can utilize this notice. You will notice that this also says this notice goes to your general membership. Every member in the branch should be notified of your election process. That is one of the reasons of why we're making sure we are pushing out this election manual to every member. Go to the next one, Trey. So in your September meeting should be used for the purpose of electing your nominating committee. Your general membership determines the number of members to be elected to the nominating committee, anywhere from 5 to 15. The general membership determines the number of at-large members to be elected. If you have not been informed, remember that because the national board has changed the bylaws, all unit bylaws are null and void. The only bylaws you follow are the national bylaws. So if for some reason in your unit you had special positions, special amounts, that is null and void. The only set of bylaws you currently follow are the national bylaws, which is why these rules should apply to everyone. Individuals elected to the nominating committee must be members in good standing, meaning they must have a membership on the rolls. Within the first 10 days of electing the committee, the secretary must call a meeting. Now, throughout these processes, we will be checking in with every unit to make sure this process is followed. So we're going to label August as phase 1, September as phase 2, October as phase 3, and your final phase will be conducting your election. Next slide, Trey. So the nominating committee's first order of business is to elect a chairman and a secretary. Your unit secretary is not the automatic secretary of the nominating committee. The committee will nominate members of the branch to run for office, and they must be a member in good standing. The committee should notify the general membership that they are available to interview members interested in office. Because we know that COVID is still around, these interviews can be conducted virtually. They do not have to be conducted in person. The nominating committee shall nominate only those persons who have given written consent to be nominated. Before the branch accepts the nominating committee report, the secretary shall verify that each nominee has given written consent. This is why in the election manual this year, we made sure that you could access the petition without a problem. So you're gonna see in the manual, there is a live link to the petition. That way you can print it off and you have it, and you don't have to tear up the manual to get access to that petition. Next slide, Trey. So in your October meeting, by now, let me walk you through what has happened. In August, you have picked the date and time of your election in your general membership meeting. Your secretary has completed the form and sent back the date and time to the national office. The national office's responsibility is we've provided your secretary with an updated roster. The thing with the roster is we want to make sure if there is someone in our system that does not have an email address or a phone number, we need your secretary to get that information. We will be saying that the secretary has signed off on the roster that is coming back to the national office. And so let me address the elephant that always seems to come in the room. Why are we asking for this? Why do we not already have it? If you are reaching out to people to attend your events, your Freedom Fund, your branch meetings, you got to be notifying them some kind of way if you're not doing it by mail. So that has to be email address or phone number. We should not wait till election time to gather this information. We should already have this information currently in the world we live in. We should have an email address or a phone number on someone. So in order to make sure that we don't have any ballots that go undeliverable, we are providing you the roster ahead of time to make sure whatever information your secretary has is the same information we have on file. We have to make sure that we don't have separate rosters. The only roster we should be housing is the roster that is in Salesforce. It is very important that we have this information because we want to make sure no one is disenfranchised in this process and you receive your ballot as well as you receive the information about your unit's election. I am going to pause because I see that our chairman has come into the room. So I will pause to allow Chairman Russell to address everyone. Chairman Russell.
Well, good evening, everybody. I hope that this election manual process is helpful for those of you who are moving forward with your election processes. As we begin this process with our September and October meetings, I hope that everybody understands the importance of having an election. I hope that you all understand the importance of doing it properly. I hope that you understand that what's happening with staff this evening is to try to prepare to make sure that you conduct these elections in a fair process, that we do it expeditiously, and that we get all of these things done by the end of the year with as little conflict as possible. The only other thing that I want to say, Erica, at this point is that elections are important, but I'd like to remind our units that you can have all the elections in the world, but if you're maintaining a 50 membership base or less, you're not really a branch. You're not really active. And I need you to think as you put yourselves out there and do this election process and select leaders, that you remember that membership is the lifeblood. You've got to have members in order for this effort, this advocacy mission to be successful. And so I challenge each of you to remember that as you go through this election process, that you will also think about the fact that you need to be committed to developing the membership strength of your units. Thank you, Erica, for giving me this opportunity. Now you can go back to your lesson.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, Trey, can you pull the slide back up? I think we were at October. And just to follow what the chairman said, there will be a push going out next week to any unit that is currently not in compliance because of your AFR. You will receive a notice from us that the UFI team is still prepared to approve your AFRs. This will not waive your election process. So let me make it clear that if you are not in compliance, that does not mean your officers are going to keep serving and they don't have to have an election. The goal is for every unit to be in compliance. We no longer allow units to operate if you're not in compliance and still use the name. So we are going to make every effort to get you in compliance. So if you have not completed the AFR, the UFI team will be making another push in reaching out to those individual units that have not submitted an AFR or you have not paid on your AFR. Those blasts will start to go out on Monday. Yes, thank you, Ms. Sheila. AFR, Annual Financial Report. We're really bad about using acronyms. Okay, so in this October meeting, what we want to make sure in the October meeting of the general membership, nominations are made and the election supervisory committee is elected. What you are going to notice in the manual this year is we are going to work very closely with the chair of the election supervisory committee. So the things we want you to remember is a member can be nominated from only one position. I've seen some interesting things. So let me make it clear that you cannot be the president and the secretary. You cannot be the secretary and the treasurer. You can only run for one position. A member does not need to be present to be nominated as long as their consent form is presented at the time of nomination. A member properly nominated for a position may withdraw from the contention by forwarding a letter requesting that his or her name be removed from the ballot. Next slide, Trey. So here we give you a sample, and this is in your manual as well. There are two types of nominations that can be made for the branch election. The nominating committee can put out their nominations, and then you also can submit your petition to be nominated. So in that meeting, you're going to see in the manual where the nominating committee will make a report and they will then open up for nominations. We want to make it very clear that no matter whether the nominating committee nominates you or you come from the floor, you must have a petition signed. It is very important to make sure that you understand no matter which form is used, you must have a written consent petition that is on file that is given to the secretary. Next slide, Trey. So the other part of the October meeting is each nominee must present a signed consent form. So we just talked about how you have to have the form. If the nominee is not on the branch roster and the nominee cannot provide proof of membership, the individual may not be nominated. This is the part of why we're sending out the rosters ahead of time. We are aware that some people have paid on their memberships and you might not have been flipped in the system. To eliminate this happening meeting, we are providing the rosters to the secretaries in August. We want to make sure that every person that should be eligible to run and vote, you have that right. So understand that if someone is listed and you are not showing active, that secretary can see that, and we need to know that so that we make sure we get the rolls cleaned up. But again, if you are not on the roster, you cannot run for a position in that unit. If the member has not signed the consent form, the individual may not be nominated. So again, you must have the written consent form. After nominations have been made, brief speeches in support of candidates should be allowed. The general membership will determine the time. So your general membership will set the time of how long the candidate speeches can be. All questions regarding eligible candidates must be resolved prior to the conclusion of the October meeting. So here again is where your unit will be informed of what staff will be staffing your election in October. We will let you know who the person is that's assigned to your roster. So that way in that October meeting, if there's an issue, we are going to know about it and we will be on hand to address that issue. If there's a discrepancy with a membership, we will make sure that we have someone from the membership team to be able to look into that issue. Another way to avoid this, I want to repeat again, we are going to provide rosters in August so that we can make sure we are looking at every membership and every member in good standing to address that before we get to the October meeting. Trey, next slide. Again, during the October meeting, the general membership shall elect an election supervisory committee consisting of 5 members of the branch in good standing. The members of the election supervisory committee must be a member of the branch. Membership current as of 30 days prior to the date they are elected. May not be candidates for office or at large. So any person serving on the election supervisory committee cannot be a candidate running for office at all. I want to make sure that's clear. Each candidate for president is entitled to appoint 1 representative to this committee. The election supervisory committee will collaborate with the national office to ensure the branch election is administered using our electronic voting platform. For example, the day of the election, if there's a concern about someone not receiving a petition, we will not take a phone call from that individual member. We will not take a phone call from your secretary. We will take a phone call from the chair of the election supervisory committee, because the election supervisory committee is the one that is conducting the election in conjunction with the national office. This committee will ensure the election is conducted in accordance with the Constitution and bylaws for branches in order to protect the right of each branch member to cast his or her ballot properly. Next slide, Trey. Now, before we complete the rest of the part of the manual, I think it's very important that you understand what you're actually running for. Who wants to run for a position and you don't know what that position is about? So, real quick, just to cover some of the basic things, we need to make sure as we move forward with this process, everyone understands the expectation that will be placed on you as a volunteer if you choose to serve in the capacity of one of these officers. You will notice the president states, it is the executive authority between meetings and not a dictatorship. Your president is not the beginning and end of the branch. It is the leader of the branch, the spokesperson of the branch. They may act in between memberships of the branch, but just because they make a decision, that does not mean that is the final decision of the branch. The governing body is your executive committee. That's who is assisting with the branch, as well as when you go into your general membership meetings. But your president should be someone that wants to step into that role and be a leader. Vice president. I don't know how many times I hear, I don't want to be the president. Then why are you running to be the vice president? Because if something happens to the president, you automatically ascend into that position. So understand, if you decide to run for that role and something happens, you will be placed into the role of president. Not the secretary, not the treasurer, the vice president. One of the things I also want to state is you operate in the absence of the president. Not when you decide y'all no longer get along. In the absence, when they are not able to perform. That's when you operate. But the vice president should be there to assist with the committee chairs, to assist with reactivating units, all of that. Bringing in memberships. I want to make sure you understand, if you take on the role of VP, you are running the chance that you might have to step into the position of president. Secretary, you are not the beginning and the end either of the unit. Now, you are the record keeper for the unit. But I understand that I know sometimes we weaponize these positions. So I want to make it clear. that as the secretary, you are the glue. You should be the person holding the unit together, but it is not to hold it to its detriment and not share information. That's not that role. We don't have that anywhere written. As the secretary, you will be responsible for accessing the Salesforce portal. As we continue to grow as an organization, we will continue to push information throughout that portal. So it is highly important that your secretary can access a computer and make sure that they can operate the computer, because everything we continue to push out will be pushed through the secretary, through the membership portal. But your secretary is your record keeper. That is the person that keeps up with your memberships in conjunction with your treasurer. Your treasurer dispenses and receives all monies. Nowhere in the bylaws are you going to see, because you don't like the decision that the executive committee made, you are refusing to write a check for the unit. That is not listed. It says that you are the person, the fiduciary officer, and you are financially responsible for the benefit of the branch to make sure that the funds are handled properly. I want to make sure you understand how important these positions are. And that's one of the reasons why at the end of the manual, you are going to see the oath of office. It is very important to understand. Yes, you are volunteers, but these are very serious positions. Your communities are depending on you to serve in these capacities and make sure to carry out the work of your unit. We can only do that as one NAACP, not individuals at all. We must be one unit. Next slide, Trey. Your executive committee. Your executive committee is your central nervous system. Like I stated, it's your governing body. Your officers should be meeting with your committee chairs. No one branch can stand alone just as officers. If you're questioning why your unit is not being successful, look around and see if you have committee chairs that are actually operating. I definitely encourage you, if you've never attended a national board meeting, to come to the board meeting and look at who does the report outs. All committee chairs are responsible to provide reports to the chairman for the chairman to report out. Most of the work is done in the committees. That is exactly how a unit should be operated. Your committee chair should be doing the work and bringing that work and those to your executive committee. And the work should be carried out and then presented to your general membership. So nowhere do you see where we say only the officers, only the committee chairs. It is one body that should be working together. And in order for us to continue forward and get where we need to be, we must be one NAACP. And we must remember, we are human beings. We are all not always going to agree, but we should be agreeing to carry out the mission and vision of this organization. And that should be the number one thing that we're looking at. Next slide, Trey. So preparations for your November election. So let's remember, phase one is your August meeting. Your secretary by now has provided the national office with your date and time for your election. The national office's responsibility is we've provided the roster. What we will also make sure is that your chair of your election supervisory committee receives the form so that once nominations are completed, they are submitting us with the ballot. We want to make sure that we are verifying that the names are spelled correctly on the ballot and that all the information is there on the ballot. They must ensure the names are placed correctly and spelled. So we'll double check this. We'll send it back, ask them to verify, and that we make sure that we got all the information correct. Election details such as ballot date and time will be submitted using the electronic form, which will be emailed by the national office. Voting shall take place during those hours announced in the election notice. Remember, there's a minimum of 4 hours for the election to rerun. Results of the election will be automatically dispersed to voters by the electronic platform at the close of the election. After the election has concluded, the election supervisory committee will be responsible for ensuring that each officer completes an officer update form. One of the concerns we have is a lot of officers are not completing the officer update form after the election. So a lot of information that we're pushing out is actually going to folks that are no longer in office. One way to ensure that we have the correct information after this election cycle is to utilize the election supervisory committee to make sure that the information is correct. The officers have updated the information in the system and we can move forward. if throughout these different phases you are seeking assistance from the national office regarding your election, remember, we need you to email the election mailbox. Please refrain from emailing individual staff members. I needed to go to that election mailbox because we have several staff members that man that box. This way, your email does not get lost in one individual mailbox. Next slide, Trey. So voting, all members in good standing are eligible to vote. Good standing means those are active at least 30 days prior to the date of the election. Ballots will be received electronically to the email or phone of record. Please make sure the email or mobile phone of your members are valid and correct in the portal. Again, this is why we're pushing out the roster starting next week, so we make sure we have good information. Once you vote from your selected method, all other methods are disabled. So if we have an email and a phone number for you, the ballot will be pushed out to your email and your phone. If you open your email and you vote in your email, the option to vote by text is disabled. If you open your text and you vote by your text, the option to vote by email is disabled. And let me just address one thing that I know might come up. Let's say you opened your ballot and you voted, and then you say, oh, I didn't want to do that. Once your vote is done, your vote is done. So please don't call and say, I think I need another ballot. Take the time you have to review the ballot and make sure that you are casting your vote for the person you want to cast your vote for. During the voting period, members will be able to cast their vote. Once submitted, you'll receive a notification that your vote has been received. That notification is going to show you have a special QR number. Everything is your information to show that your vote was received. If on election day you have not received a ballot, you should contact the chair of the election supervisory committee, not the secretary, the chair of the election supervisory committee. Now, one of the things as we get into the electronic platform that Brendan will be able to show you with the screen captures, we instantly, the moment we run the election, we see which ballots are coming back undeliverable, which is why it's important that we have the information for the chair of the election supervisory committee. We will immediately be able to notify them to say which ballots have come back undeliverable so that we can fix if there is an email incorrect or a phone number, we can immediately fix that and get that ballot flipped back out to that person. This is why it's key that we have this contact information and we are nonstop in contact with the unit to make sure that no one is disenfranchised throughout this process. Next slide, Trey. And I will now turn it over to you to talk about the electronic platform.
Thank you so much, Erica. I really appreciate that. You're always such a tough act to follow, so I'll do my best. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brendan Wakefield, also known as Trey. I'm sure you've been hearing Erica say, Trey, flip the slides. That is not a ghost in the machine. That was me changing the slides. And I'm so excited to talk to you all today about everybody's favorite platform, Election Buddy. I feel like I felt some of you roll your eyes when I said that, but by the time we're done with this, it will be one of your favorite platforms. So how to vote using Election Buddy. Just to give you some insight, Election Buddy is a Election Buddy is a cloud-based voting platform that we can use to send ballots electronically using your email or your SMS text messages. So if you have a mobile device, you'll be able to vote with your mobile device. Those ballots are going to come out to you immediately when the election begins. So if you're voting by email, I wanted to make sure that we broke down examples of each of the voting options that you'll have. So this first one here is email. As you can see, you're going to get an email that comes from Election Buddy. I just want to point that out because a lot of people think that the email comes from the national office or it comes from someone on our team, but I want you guys to look out for an Election Buddy email. If you don't see that in your main inbox, please, please, please check your spam. Once you open that email, you'll see it gives you it's telling you vote now. You're receiving your ballot for the Freedom Branch election, and you'll be able to click the link here to vote. If you're voting with your mobile device, you're going to receive a text message. This is just a screenshot of what it looks like for iPhone, but it looks pretty much the same for Android. You're going to receive a text message that says NAACP election ballot. That comes from the 877 number, so be on the lookout for that. And it says new ballot notification, vote here. So when you click that link, it's going to take you straight into your ballot, and that ballot is specific to you. So once you vote and you've submitted that vote, it's going to be saved. So as VP Kane said, you won't be able to go in and make any changes. So be sure that you take the time to actually review the ballot to make sure you're making the selections that you truly want. All right, so what will the ballot look like? I wanted to break down an example for you here to show you exactly what the ballot looks like. This example specifically is if you were voting via text message, but it's browser agnostic. It actually looks exactly the same when you're voting via desktop. So as you can see here, it's going to break down each candidate, give you your options. No matter how many candidates, you'll always have an option to abstain if you don't want to vote for any of the candidates listed. Once you've made all of your selections, you'll click submit in the bottom right-hand corner. Undeliverable ballots. So VP Kane did touch on this a bit, and we have hit the ground running. We've done some groundwork, and we've created a process to ensure that every member in good standing is receiving their ballot. So why would a ballot be undeliverable? A ballot would be undeliverable if for some reason we didn't have a correct phone number or email on file, which is why we are really encouraging everyone to make sure those rosters are up to date. We have all of the emails, all of the phone numbers that you can provide, because that is how the ballots are going to be released to the members. As you can see here in Election Buddy, this screenshot here is actually an example of what we see in Election Buddy on our side. So as soon as the election starts, it's going to actually send out all of the ballots, and it's going to notify us of how many notices were undeliverable. We are able to now pull a report, and it's going to be an Excel document. We'll pull that report, send that to the election supervisory chair, and they'll be able to follow up with those members and get us updated information. Now, please keep in mind that we are only able to see undeliverable ballots at the top of the election. So we cannot see them prior to your election starting. We aren't able to verify if all of the ballots are going to go through or not. We have quite a few elections to run, so unfortunately we can't run a test election for every single unit. So we want to make sure that we get that information updated in August, September, October, so that we're prepared and have all of the updated information in the membership portal once the election runs in November. Once that undeliverable ballot report is sent to the election chair, you can communicate back and forth with your designated person that's been assigned to your roster or to the elections email box. Election results. Election results are automatically dispersed at the end of the election, but they're only going to be dispersed to those individuals whose ballots were deliverable. If for some reason we did not have information for a member or their information was incorrect, the election results will not automatically go to that individual at the end of the election. The way this is set up is as soon as the election closes, those results will go out. You'll get a text message or an email, depending on which method you voted by. If you voted via text message, you'll get the election results via text. If you voted via email, you'll get them via email. But you'll click the link and it'll actually take you back into Election Buddy to see the results of the election. And every member will be able to review those results. And that brings us to the end of our election process and procedures presentation. I'm going to pass it over to Erica to spearhead our Q&A session, but thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Trey. So one of the things as we're going through this, I'm going to start to hit some of the questions that are in the Q&A. Also, I am looking at to make sure everyone understands one of the things that's actually going to make sure we embed in this year part of the process is there's going to be a 30-day transition. So you're going to run your election in November, and then there's 30 days to transition information. This is to stop from where when leadership changes, we kind of get amnesia and forget that the property belongs to the NAACP, not the individual. So the national office will also be making sure that information is transferred over to the next set of officers if the leadership changes. I definitely want to make sure everyone understands. We're going to give you a 30-day time frame to transition information. So we should not in February receive emails that says an officer has still not turned over information and this unit cannot operate. So it's very important to make sure everybody understands that piece. So I do see some questions in the Q&A. So one of the first questions, should secretaries be sending out the election manual to unit members? Absolutely. This manual should be shared with every member because every member has the right to see the election process and also determine if they want to run for office. Is the manual being sent via email to those that have no email or cell phone? Yes. So all of our communication goes through email. So the manual is shared that way. Again, after this call, we will also share the manual out again. Someone said they don't hold meetings in August. So let me address that. Per our rules, you should hold a monthly meeting every month. Now, I do know some of us get fancy and we decide to take off in the summer, in the winter months, but let me make it very clear that civil rights does not take a month off. So I definitely would say that is something you need to look at because your unit should be having a meeting every month, and this process must be started in August. These rules will not affect college chapters because youth councils and college chapters have an election every year and their process has already happened. I would need clarification because there's a question that says, so board members cannot be elected as officers. We only have one board, which is the national board, and our board members can serve in any capacity. So if I'm not answering that question correctly, please let me know. So one of the things I continue to see is that our unit is very small. I would definitely say this is the opportunity to grow your unit. No matter if there's only one person running for every position, you must still run an election through the system. This year, if you do not follow through this process, you will receive notice from the national office. Again, I cannot stress enough that if you are struggling with members, that is even more reason why we need to look at what is happening in your area and how to grow your unit. You must have an election. There is no secession plan in the NAACP. Everyone has the right to run for positions. And even if those positions are unopposed, we will still run an election through the electronic platform. So one of the questions you will notice in the bylaws and in the manual, in order to run for office, you must live or work in the area that you are running for. That is clear in our rules. You must live or work in the area. In reference to ballots, the ballots will be sent out to your email and your phone as long as we have an email and a phone on file for you. So it will trigger and go out to both of them. So you will have the ability to either vote by email or vote through text. The election time frame, 24 hours. I don't know why we would run one for 24 hours. The minimum is 4 hours. We can discuss that. So I would need to know what we will be running at 24 for. So that would be something you would need to email the election mailbox. In reference to the notices, you will notice that this year we did put in that you have the option to email your election notice. So make sure that you can email it or you can mail it. It is still encouraged per the rules that you put the notice in newspaper, however you get communication out. Let me say this, the same way that you advertise your Freedom Fund, advertise this election. Because we put everything we have into advertising a Freedom Fund. We need to advertise this election the same way you advertise your Freedom Fund. It should not be a secret. People should not have to go dig and figure out where your election, the date and time of your election. Yes, so the election manual will continue to go out. We have pushed it out to several people. We will continue to push it out after this call. If you have registered for any of the webinars, we will continue to push it out that way. We have shared it with units and we have shared it with state conferences as well. I will repeat again, if you're putting a question in the chat, you are not going to get an answer to that question. I need the question in the Q&A. So if you're putting questions in the chat, I'm going to encourage you again to put them in the Q&A. I will definitely say the question came up again about if you don't have an August meeting. I'm going to remind everyone again that you should be meeting monthly. You will notice per the manual, it says you have up to that first week of September for your general membership to pick the date of your election. We are going to hold you to that time frame. Rules, yes. So please make sure the election rules are clear on who can actually serve in the capacity and be related. It is clearly outlined, unit presidents, treasurers, and secretaries. Members that are deceased have not been removed from rosters. Some might, that is not the case. Now, your secretary has the option to pull the members that are active and the members they know. That will be on your secretary to have that information. The national office is not going to know who has passed in your unit. So that's why it's critical that your secretaries are keeping up with that information. So someone posted this notice has been done in September in the past. I understand, but the rule has always been the meeting date is selected in August, and it clearly in the rules state you have up to the first week to send the notice. That is not a rule that has changed. That's always been the rule. Notices to all membership. So you are sending the notice of the election to all members that can vote in the election. So I'm going to say again, there's a question about who can run and who can vote in the election manual. It clearly states what the timeframes are for those who can run for office. This will be the last round that we use for date. You must have been a member as of May 1st, 2024, and there cannot be a lapse in your membership. So example, if you were a member as of May 1st, and then you just decided to dip out June and July, that's not how it works. You must have a continuous membership throughout that time frame. So your general membership determines the number of how many people can serve on the committee. There's a question about someone doesn't understand that. So the number that serves on your nominating committee, your membership will determine how many people they want to serve on that committee. The form will be sent out to the secretaries to send in the date and time for the meeting. All nominations have to go through the nominating committee first, and then the nominating committee will open up the process. All nominations with consent forms are accepted and verified. Uh, Clarify by what date a member needs to be a member. And so you had to be a member in good standing as of May 1st to run for office, and to vote in the election, you have to be a member 30 days before the election. I know this question has come up several times. This is not our first round of electronic elections. We do understand some of our members do not have email, but they have phone. We are not trying to leave any audience out, but this is not the first round of us having this process. And I will use the example again. When COVID happened, how were you reaching out to your members then? So by now we should have an email address or a phone number for members. I know one of the other questions was, what if they have the same phone number or same email? Two names will receive two separate identifiers. So it is okay if Miss Jones and Mr. Jones has the same email address, the system identifies them with two different numbers because of their name. So they can cast two ballots off that one email. Guys, I'm gonna repeat again. If you are putting questions in the chat, they need to come into the Q&A session. If you do not have members that have a physical address, but you have an email, that is why you'll see in the manual the option to email out the notice. What happens is they have to receive notice of the September, October, and the November election. So if you do not have a physical mailing address, you can email them. Unit bylaws. So because the national bylaws are in the process of changing, all unit bylaws are null and void. So that question was asked. So if you had a set of unit bylaws, those do not count right now. The only set of bylaws that count are the national bylaws. So question was, are the September and October meetings supposed to be in person, or can they be by Zoom? The manual implies in person. Yes, because we would love for you to be meeting in person, but we also understand you now have the option to meet virtually. So again, depending on where you are in the world, I understand COVID is ramping up, which is why we give you the virtual option. But you need to make sure that has been communicated and everyone knows which format you are using for that meeting. I would need clarification on, can the election committee and supervisory committee be the same folks? The nominating committee and election supervisory cannot be the same folks. They have two different purposes. Can a member who has an Article 10 run for office if they have not been suspended? Let me know if I didn't answer that question. We answered that one.
Erica, could you provide a little more clarity on the same email piece?
Yes, so we tested out to make sure if you have the same email address, because we understand some people, when you set up email address, you both have the same email address. Because Sue Johnson and Jimmy Johnson are two different names and two different identifiers as members. They are going to receive two separate ballots. Now, because to make sure we tested all this out, when Mr. Johnson votes, his ballot wipes and his credentials. Miss Johnson gets a separate ballot off of her membership ID, and she is able to vote. So we do not have to have you create a separate email address. If you have the same email address, that is okay, because you get two different identifiers to vote.
So Erica, when you say phone, I need you to say cell or
cell
mobile
phone. Yes, not your landline. Cell phone. Cell phone. Yes, I'm glad you said that. Cell phone, because I know people still have landlines. My mother has a landline. Cell phone. So again, if your question will not get answered if it's being put in the chat. I'm just going to say again, because I see quite a few questions are going into the chat and not the Q&A. So let me address, because I keep seeing a couple of things, and Chairman, if you want to chime in on this, you can. if you have concerns about people running for office in your unit, and you think that these people are bad characters or they have something going on, that is your responsibility not to cast a vote for them. I cannot stress enough again that you are putting people in a leadership position, but this should not become a smear campaign about somebody. So if it's because you do not like the candidate, that is your personal right not to like the candidate. But if you know that there's someone that might cause harm to this association or the unit, then that is something that you need to look at. But I can't stress enough that if they have not done something in the capacity as a officer of the NAACP, it is not our job to judge that person. So because I'm seeing a lot in the Q&A. So again, I can't stress enough that our enemy is not on the inside. But if you know somebody has done something wrong, then we should not be voting them in office, but it should not be because that's your personal opinion. It needs to be facts attached to it. And is it something they've done in the capacity of NAACP? Chairman.
Life memberships, just to clarify, because Deborah Travis keeps putting it back in there. The question that if life memberships were not recognized, we are trying to flip those into general records so that everybody gets a ballot. We realize that there have in previous elections, there was confusion about life memberships. We have tried to correct that this year. That's the first thing. Second thing, organizations. I know that some people would like to be able to vote 2 or 3 times, but individual members vote. Churches don't vote. Corporations don't vote. Other organizations don't vote. Individual members vote in branch elections.
Okay. So to be clear, your nominating petition must be signed. So you can have the petition and put your name on there, but it must be signed. We gave you 4 lines, but it must be signed by 3 members in good standing. And in good standing means they have a current membership. So your consent form must be signed. And that's why the rule on the 4th page clarifies that it cannot be signed by you. So you cannot be one of the signers, and it cannot be signed by a staff person. Okay, I'm scrolling through these. Oh, this is a good one. Can a member who has a membership in more than one unit run for office only in their home branch, or they're allowed to run for office in more than one branch? So you should only have one membership. We are definitely working to clean up the roads to merge your memberships. You are to only have one membership in one unit and vote in one unit. You cannot live over here, and I guess that's what signifies home branch, and you work over here, and I guess that's your work branch. One branch, one unit. That was an interesting way of saying that, a home branch and a I've never heard it like that. So in order to run for office again, it is in the manual, May 1st, 2024. The election can be held any day of the week. Yes, we work on weekends. So yes. Who are the members of the executive committee? Your executive committee is composed of your officers and your committee chairs. I'm going to say Courtney Brock. I'm scrolling through like 200 questions. So you said, will your question be answered today or in the future? I'm gonna ask if you'll type it again, just in case if I don't get to it, so that way it'll be at the bottom of the list, because I don't think I've run across it yet. Yes.
Unit bylaws. Unit bylaws do not supplant the national bylaws with respect to elections. Your unit bylaws are defunct. The board declared at its May board meeting that because we have amended the Constitution and bylaws and will be reproducing such, that all unit bylaws are now null and void. But even if they were not, your unit bylaws would not supplant the election procedures outlined in this manual.
Thank you, Chairman. So there's also a question that says, how close are we going to follow these rules? We are following these rules. We are following them. The staff is going to follow every phase of this process. There is no reason why we should not follow these rules. Remember, page 4 is the only part that changed. The rest of these rules have been here, so they're not new. We are following these rules. And if they are not followed, then I would definitely encourage you to read all of the verbiage at the bottom of that manual that says, at any time, the national office can intervene in your election if we have a concern that you are not following the phases of the election. So please, we need to follow our rules.
Erica, Ms. Brock asks how to handle couples that share email addresses and or cell phones.
Okay, so yeah, they're fine. They're gonna get 2 separate ballots. So if they have the same email or same phone number, they're fine. Thank you, Ms. Brock, for putting that again, because I didn't know if I got to that question. So fine, they will still get 2 separate ballots. So the question, the rule says about presidents, secretaries, and treasurers. It doesn't say anything about VPs. So again, the concern is about signers and financial responsible officers. Well, again, we want to make sure it's clear that this is not a family NAACP. We are one family, but people outside the family can run for office. And again, we've had an influx of issues across all of our units where there is a concern when signers are the same family members. It is easy to circumvent our rules at times. So again, that rule is clear of which people cannot be family members. Again, what I want to make clear is we are not telling you that you cannot run for office. So if you are a president and a secretary and you are spouses, you can run, but know that if both of you win, one must make a decision. We are not going to make that decision for you, but we need to make sure you understand this rule up front. And that rule is clear. That rule was approved as of June 1st, 2024.
So Erica, the nominating committee presents one name for each position on the ballot. They do not present multiple names. If other people wish to run, they must have petitions and their names can be submitted from the floor with petitions and a consent to run form.
Yes. So there's a question about if someone is running for state senate and they're elected as treasurer, can they hold office? So I'm definitely going to encourage you to go and read our resolution about if you are running for any elected position. From the moment that you announce your candidacy, you must step aside in the position that you have for the national, for NAACP. So again, if you are serving in an elected position, from the moment you announce your candidacy, you must step aside from the position that you are holding in our association. If you have further questions about that, please email the Field Operations Department mailbox. A question here about should the president be involved in every standing committee and attend every meeting? Yes, so your president and secretary are ex officio members of your standing committees. I'm not gonna say they have to be at every meeting, but there should be involvement from those officers. Also, remember your secretary is not the secretary of every standing committee. The responsibility of your chair of your committees is to elect the secretary. We cannot have the secretary being the secretary of all standing committees. And Chair, I think you answered the question about nominations from the committee and the floor. This is 4 hours online. This election is strictly electronic. There is no in-person election. So I guess I need to clarify that. All of your election process, from the moment your ballot opens, it is electronically sent. There is no in-person. So there is no option for your unit to decide that you're going to run a separate election on paper. That is not an option. Your election must be ran through the electronic platform that we are currently using. So there is no option to say, hey, we decided to go ahead and run ours on our own. No. Everything must be done through the electronic platform that the national office has selected. So this is a great question. This is something we looked at where we do know that sometimes in some cases, people do not have computers. If your unit is fortunate enough to have computers, they are able to come and log into their email to access their ballot. I'm not going to tell you they cannot do that. Just the same way that they can go to a public library and log into a computer and access their ballot. But it must be done through our electronic platform. You cannot choose another platform. You cannot run a poll through a Zoom meeting. It must be the platform that the national office is using, and the national office must be the one sending the ballot. So just to answer the question, the ballot will be sent by both forms this year. We'll send it by email and phone as long as we have both on file. We have to have both on file. Definition of an active member is a member in good standing, meaning they have a paid membership. Now, I have a different definition of active, but in reference to election, we're going to use good member in standing, paid membership. So there's a question about, would a verification process ensure that the names on the election supervisory committee match the secretary's meeting minutes? So it would be the minutes, the nominating committee report is what the election supervisory gets, not the secretary's minutes. So the nominating committee makes a report and that is used, not the secretary's record of minutes.
Just
Members,
repeat, Erica, repeat. Anyone submitting themselves for election must have been a member by May
1st.
And I saw a question, I think I know who from, but I won't pick on them that badly. We went through the home branch question. Same applies for snowbirds.
Snowbirds.
You might have taken out a membership somewhere, but you pick one branch as your active unit where you live or where you work. If you go to Arizona or if you live in Lake County, Florida, half the year, you have to decide, is Lake County, Eustis, your branch, or is wherever in Ohio you live, your branch? You get one ballot.
Yes. And again, just to address, we fully understand that we have seasoned members, but I'm going to use the example of Dr. Hazel Dukes, who uses a computer every day at her tender young age. So I'm sorry, guys, we're in a world where everyone has access to either a phone or a computer. If they don't, you have a public library. We cannot stay in an olden time and not embrace new processes. We must embrace change, and we have to move to this format. We will continue to consider other things, but we cannot continue to say, if someone does not have a computer or cell phone, because I'm gonna go back to the question of how do you advertise your chicken dinner to them if you're not contacting them by phone or email? So we cannot now think about technology when it's time to run an election. I'm sorry, we got to get past that. So let's figure out if they don't have it, how can we assist them? Maybe that's a program that your community coordination chair should be. That's something we might need to look at that your unit can embrace and work on. But we got to figure out how to bring everybody together and keep this moving. This organization will not survive another 115 years if we don't embrace new things.
And to that point, I'm just going to be frank. Y'all, grandma is playing bingo on her cell phone. She is playing games. She got it in church in the purse with the mints. She needs to put her cell phone number in the record so that she can receive a ballot.
Yes. Cannot stress that enough. So you will see in the manual, there is a section about youth members voting in your branch election. On page 16, it references the minimum age for them to vote.
And if you got youth members on your roster that have paid the youth membership, you need to have a youth council so they can vote in their youth council where they're supposed to be.
So there is a question, if you have a unit that is under 50 members, will they have an election? Chairman, what is your advice on that?
If they have under 50 members, they're not a compliant unit. We need to reorganize them. I suggest that you go get 50 members right quick.
Yes. So there's a question about how will the supervisory chair have access to contact information to the undeliverable ballots? What we want to make sure is we have contact of the chair. We will have the information of the people that have access of the undeliverable ballots, but we will be communicating that with the chair. So just like in the past, if somebody said, I didn't get the ballot, they went to the secretary. They now need to go to the chair of the supervisory committee and they can contact us and we can check what's in the system. Again, it's using the chair of the election supervisory committee and not the secretary, because in some cases, your secretary is running for office. So we have a committee that is set and we need to utilize that committee for the purpose that it's set. Okay, so I think I did address your meetings. The rule states your meetings can be in person or virtual. We set that rule after COVID. We've addressed the emails, same house. Yes, so if you look in our bylaws, it does state that April 1st is the date. We did change that date in COVID. And so because the information was continuing to change and the May 1st date was the date that was still publicized, we will honor that date this election cycle. We will go back to the April 1st date after this election cycle. But because that date was still advertised as the date, we are not going to change that date. We are going to stick with the May 1st date. The election results will go to everyone that has cast a ballot. Shanita, Trey, are you guys seeing any questions that I haven't touched on?
Any ones I'm seeing, I'm answering in the chat also.
Okay.
I mean, in Q&A.
If you're a member of the National Board of Directors, you can run for office in your local branch.
Yes.
Members of the nominating committee can be nominated. However, we should not be getting on the nominating committee in order to nominate ourselves.
Okay, let's see. Do we have any other ones? We answered that one. Yes, so once you send in the date, we will send you back confirmation that we have locked in your date and time for the election. So once we receive the notification from the secretary on the form, we will respond back to the secretary with notification that the date and time has been locked in for your election. At this time, you cannot email members from the portal. You do have to pull down the roster to send them an email. Yes, you do still have first and second VPs. The election manual is on the website, Trey. Is it on a page by itself now, or is it tied to something?
It is. I dropped it in the chat, but I'll drop it in here again. Just a moment.
And then, Shanita, if you can drop in the chat the volunteer link, so everyone knows that our current goal this year for this election cycle is to get 300,000 volunteers. So we are dropping a link in the chat that we are asking if you would like to volunteer, or you know someone that wants to volunteer this year with the election process for the big election. Please use that link to sign up, and the civic engagement department will reach out to you. But again, we cannot stress enough that we need all hands on deck. We need everyone to be all in. And we need as many volunteers as possible to make sure that we are getting folks registered to vote. We are accommodating folks by taking them to the polls. We are doing everything we need to do to be all in, as the president stated.
Right. So a member at large is just that, a member at large. They are not a member of a unit. And if you are not a member of the unit in good standing, you cannot vote in the election, even though you have a valid membership in the association. So if you have a number of folks who identify as members at large, you should encourage them to change their membership to be members of your unit.
Yes. So there's I think I'm in the chat now. Okay. So the only people that are allowed to see the roster are the presidential candidates. Every officer does not get an option to see the roster. We are not mailing out paper. Everything is done electronic. So the reason why we're sending the rosters is for those secretaries that might not have access to the portal at this time, but we are going to continue pushing out that your secretary should have access to the portal. It will be emailed.
And just to be repetitive, if you know you have a number of members who only receive US mail, then you should send out notices via US mail to those folks.
All right.
We did have one, Erica, if you could answer. Since the VP can sign in place of the president, why doesn't the family rule apply regarding VPs?
Because the VP should only be signing in the absence of the president, not because you didn't want to give it to the president. So that means your president is not existing and your VP has extended to president. Your VP should only be signing in the absence, not circumventing the system. And the VP is signing because they're not in close proximity. Like I can't. And let me say this, just for those that if you do not know me past this capacity as national staff, I just exited the National Board of Directors and I've been a volunteer for 25 years. So understand everything I'm saying is coming from my heart, but it's also real and it's true. And it's something I know we do in this association that causes us detriment at times. So know that nothing I'm saying is intended to be harsh, but it's a reality that we have to get past in order to do the work of this association. We do not need anyone on the outside. We cause enough harm on the inside at times. So we have rules in place for a reason. We need to follow those. You should not be circumventing the president signing requisitions, vouchers, or checks because it is easier for you to get to the first VP. Your president should be the person. Please know that once we run this round of branch elections, trainings will roll out. This year, when you sign that petition, it states that you will receive mandatory training. It will be back implemented to make sure that everyone understands their role and their capacity. We will also make sure every unit is using a requisition or a voucher. No transaction should be done without a voucher or a requisition with a receipt attached. And on that voucher and requisition, it should be your president, your secretary, and your treasurer, the key financial people of the unit. Your president, because your president is your president. Your secretary, because that's your record keeper who should be keeping a voucher with a copy of the receipt. And your treasurer, because that should be the person saying if you got the money in the bank. It is a full process we need to follow, and we can't circumvent that process. So the national board decided that the rules are clear, that unit presidents, treasurers, and secretaries may not be related. I'm only delivering what has been given to us. This should not be a difficult task for us because we should have plenty of folks that can serve in those capacities. If we don't, then we need to spread out and start looking for more people. And I'll pose the question. There shouldn't be no conversation or no event you're attending and you're not asking someone if they are a member of this association. And if folks are not wanting to join your unit, then I'm going to ask you to turn the mirror on your unit and ask, are you pushing out programs in your community that makes people want to come to this association? So those rules are clear. We're not wavering on those. That's it.
So
now,
let's go back and talk about what a member in good standing is. Because I see a question about what happens when a person's membership is lapsed. A person can only vote in this election if they have been a member, which means a paid compliant member 30 days prior to the election. They can only run for office if they are a member by the May 1st deadline.
right. So what if a member had paid, but the secretary hadn't updated the information, so it looked like their membership lapsed? You need to email the election mailbox and show documented proof of when you paid your membership. That again is the reason of why we're starting now to make sure that everyone that should be listed as an active member is an active member. Yes, so I think we clarified, once your secretary completes the form, we will give confirmation that we have your date and time of your election. Continuous membership means it can't lapse. It has to be continuous. This training is open to all members of the association, which is why we are continuing to offer multiple sessions. There is nothing we are saying in here that it should only be said to officers. This information is for every member of this association. I think we've clarified what dates you have to be an officer, and eligible to run for office. All right. Let's see if we got anything new at the bottom. Yes, so just to address what I keep saying, there's nothing I can do about the election cycle that happened 2 years ago. I can only take what I know was given to me as a board member, as well as concerns that we have for units. This is why we are going this route. And this is why I'm steady stressing. We are taking the time to make sure that staff will be available. We're taking the time to put this process in place. And we need you to follow this process so that we can make sure Nothing is going that is not supposed to go the way it is. So it is very important that you follow the manual and you have these meetings at the time that you need to have them, and that you are reporting back to the national office with the information that we need you to give us. If you put questions in the chat or Q&A that do not relate to election, and they relate specifically to your unit, I'm gonna ask that you send them to the Field Operations Department mailbox. I did not say secretaries have checks. I said secretaries should sign requisitions and vouchers. And I'm gonna refer everyone again to the bylaws because it clearly outlines what each officer is responsible for. Okay, I think we have enough to build the FAQ definitely. So Chairman, we are getting the question about, do we have to have wet signatures or are we accepting electronic signatures?
At this point, we have no way of verifying an electronic signature. So a wet signature is preferred.
So example, you can take your petition, email it to Ms. Sue. Ms. Sue can sign, scan it back to you. And you can send it to the next person if you're not in person. Again, at some point, we should be back in person, seeing people. Okay. So again, because there are no unit bylaws, your general membership determines the number of folks that sit on the executive committee, and that is based off the number that is in the national office bylaws. So yes, there should be no more than 24 people on your executive committee.
Right. And all officers and the at-large members of the executive committee will be on the ballot.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think I fully agree with you, Mr. David Whitehead. Okay. So again, we are going to have another session on Saturday. We will have another session next Wednesday. We are going to cover the same information. We are going to do our due diligence to make sure any person that should be an active member is an active member. So again, the staff will be going through the rosters. We're going to send them to the secretaries. Your secretaries, if you have been operating in the portal, you should know who has paid on a life membership and it has not flipped them. That is the type of information we're going to need to know so that we make sure we flip them to active. Now, let me give you an example of what we will not be doing. You think you paid a life membership 10 years ago, but you are nowhere in the portal. There's no record of it. We are now not going to go through that piece. There has to be some record of you in the portal. What we are looking at is by chance, if you had a regular membership and you took out a WIN membership, making sure those dates are still aligned. And if you should be listed as active, you are listed as active. That is the thing. We are not adjusting dates because you thought that you paid on May 1st, but you really didn't pay till May 31st. We are not doing that. So let me put that out now, that we are not playing with dates for you to run for office. The date that had been publicized, the date that was out in the old manual was May 1st, and we will honor that May 1st date that you are eligible to run for office. But if for some reason you have paid your membership It has not been entered into the portal. You have proof of that. We do need that information because we need to get it corrected, but we also need to address the issue of why it's not being put in the portal. So I think we touched the ones. So I'm going to address this one because this one kind of concerns me. So I'm also going to reference you to go to the website and look at the financial bookkeeping guide. Our bookkeeping guide outlines that there should be no transaction done without a paper trail. So I'm not understanding the questions about why are we saying the secretary and the president should be signing. Your president is the person that's signing the check. Your treasurer is signing the check. So the process is you need a record of saying why they signed it, which is your requisition or your voucher. It should state what the transaction is for, because this transaction, any funds disbursed should be approved to be going out. So that means this record is showing your president signed off on it, your treasurer, and your secretary, because that is the person that should be keeping the record. This also funnels into when you're completing your AFR process and when you're balancing your treasurer's report. There should be a paper trail. There should be no transaction made that we don't have a paper trail on. So that is why those officers are the ones that should be signing. Now, if your president cannot sign, yes, that's why your first VP comes into place and they are also a signer on the account. But that should be when your president is out the country or Lord forbid something medical happens or whatever, but it's not you're circumventing them because you don't want them to sign because they didn't approve the expenditure. I also will remind you that your president of a unit should only be making an expenditure of $100 without approval of the executive committee, but must still then bring that back to that body to get approval. So no funds should be disbursed without the body approving it and without there being a paper trail. That way we know everyone that signed off on that transaction. I think in the financial bookkeeping guide, it asks you to keep either 2 to 3 years worth of records, but I can double check that in the financial bookkeeping guide. We are actually in the process of updating that guide as well. No, you are not automatically on the ballot if you are on the executive committee. You must submit the paperwork to go through the process.
Including a consent form.
Yes, so you must submit a consent form. So there's no, because you've been in that role, you still get to stay in that role. The national office does not take money directly from your bank account unless you have given us access. And I know this is something that's been out there, so I'll make this my last answer. Anytime we take funds out your account, that means you've submitted a form and told us to take it out. So AFR process, you got to click submit for us to take it out. We do not just say, oh, they owe us, we finna go snatch that money. No, because we don't know if you have the money in there. The treasurer should be tracking it because based off the way the portal is set, your secretary should enter the memberships. And I'm gonna go ahead and say this, and I know this is gonna stump some of y'all because I know some of y'all are doing this, which is why we're rewriting the process. Your secretary should then notify your treasurer, who also should have access to the portal, that it is time to pay for the batch and give them the batch number to make the payment. But now I know some of us are very crafty. And that is why it causes us hardship when it's time to balance and do the AFR, because your treasurer is not aware of what batches have been paid throughout the portal. So we are currently rewriting that process, and we are going to be able to provide that process in detail to secretaries, treasurers, and presidents as we build out some changes to the portal. All right. So difference between life membership is it's a life membership. You're taking out one of the tiers. A WIN membership is women in NAACP. That's a WIN membership.
It is, and a WIN membership does not equate to a unit membership.
So I'm going to again ask that everyone please go read the resolution about if someone is running for office. It is not just to offices that are partisan. It is nonpartisan, school board, city council, all of that. If you are running a campaign, you must step aside from your elected position in the association. Oh, great question. Can you ask for a biography of candidates running for the executive committee? I'm gonna say I think you need to know who the people are running, which is why you need to have the candidate speeches, because I will tell you, you don't want to get the look. Think about what these people are running for. I always joked and told people I never should serve in a capacity as a treasurer because I don't even have a checkbook. I just swipe the card. Don't even think about nothing else. So I wouldn't be a good treasurer. You need someone that is financial focused, wants to balance books. Your secretary, if that's the person that show up to the meeting and all the papers keep falling out the folder and they just don't have it together, that might not be the person you want to be your record keeper. Let's think about these things, but this is why you should have candidates giving speeches. Why do you want to run for the position? Why do you want to be a part of this association? That is something you should, the same way that board members have to campaign when they want to serve on the board. That's the same thing we should be looking at when people run for office. All right. Okay, well, I don't understand the question about it should never be one signature. Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. Never one signature on a check. Yes, our rule clearly outlines 2 signatures. Understand, we're coming with the president training, the VPs, the secretary, and the treasurer training. That is definitely coming after we run this election cycle.
And Erica, I'm not joking here, but I'm going to say it this way. It definitely should not be one signature when that is somebody other than the treasurer.
Yes. So Chairman, this is our last question, but I think this is something we had discussed. There's a question that says, can candidates running for office request information be sent to all branch members?
You're talking about their biographic?
I think their bio, yeah.
You know, that's one that the units are going to have to determine. Some units may decide that if you give us a 2-paragraph bio, we'll put it on our website. Some may decide we're going to send election information to our members via email, whatever. That's an individual unit decision. But if they do it for one, they have to do it for all.
Yes. So that is definitely something that you can discuss in your August or your September meeting, but it is something that your unit needs to decide. No one person should make that decision for your unit. That should be something that the body is deciding.
Right.
So, okay. Well, I will definitely say thank you guys again for coming on. If you have questions that did not relate to the election process, please still send those questions to us. We will, everyone that has signed up for the webinar, we will email you out the manual. I don't know if she's on, but I wanted to say to one of my super favorite people, Ms. Green in San Antonio, thank you for proofing the manual. You caught something we missed, so I truly appreciate it. I know you read everything line by line, and we appreciate that. So we've made that change to the manual. We will get this out to everyone that signed up for the webinar. Again, if you want to attend on Saturday, next Wednesday, please do. If you have someone that has not received the information for the webinar or the manual, please share this. This is not anything that is only allowed to just members or people running for office. This session is open to every member in the association. So Thank you guys. Again, we have the volunteer link that was in the chat, so please utilize that if you want to sign up. You also will be receiving information tomorrow. There will be a all-unit call on Tuesday at 7:30 Eastern to discuss Project 2025. So as we get that information out to units, please share that with everyone, that there will be a all units call on Tuesday to discuss Project 2025. Thank you guys for joining us tonight and have a great night.